And I just wanted to let everyone know that this will probably be like a 45-minute long workshop. And I guess the latter half of the workshop will involve Figma. So if you're by a computer right now, it'd be great if you could pull up Figma. It's like a free design software. We're going to go through a little like, I guess, demo so you guys can get a feel for how to use Figma. So like I said, if you're able to, please try to like open a Figma account in the time that I go through. Sorry, just let me read some message. Yeah, sorry about that. I do think our events team did send out an email with more information, but that was probably like 2 weeks ago. But we will definitely make sure to kind of give more notice for that next time. But I guess this will be recorded, so if you have to, I guess, miss some of it, don't worry, you'll be able to find it on our YouTube. But let me get started. So I have some slides prepared. And if anyone could let me know whether you can see the slides, that would be great. Somebody could just kind of put it in the chat or react so I know that you guys can see my screen right now. That'd be great. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so I guess we can get started then. This will be an intro to UI and UX design. And I'll get into, I guess, a little bit about why the field is even important for neuroscience, because I'm sure a lot of you are probably wondering that. But we'll also talk about some technical skills that you can develop, as well as resources to continue learning UI UX design after this workshop. So I'll start with my background. Hi, everyone. I'm Lina. I guess I'm a sophomore at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm doing my undergraduate studies right now. I'm majoring in neuroscience, and then I'm hoping to minor in either computer science or design. And then the role I'm most known for here at Simply Neuroscience is Director of Marketing. So I guess you've probably seen a lot of our posts on social media. My role is to kind of like oversee those, make a lot of those posts to communicate with you guys when we have events, as well as some other fun facts. So that's a little bit about me. And then I wanted to start off this presentation with kind of breaking down what UI and UX design even are, because they're terms, I guess, that are kind of thrown around a lot, but we don't really, I guess, spend enough time explaining like what they actually are. So they're actually not exactly the same thing, but they do have some similarities. So I'll start with UX design. UX design is the term for user experience design. And so basically a UX designer is basically focused on the process of creating a product from start to finish. So they're the ones who are really talking to users to understand like what their needs are. They're the ones that are translating those research into actual products that fit user needs better. And I'll just mention that the product could be digital or physical, but I'm mostly focusing on digital products. And some skills, I guess, that are involved in a UX designer's day-to-day life would be user research, prototyping, etc. And then on the other hand, user interface design is kind of focused specifically on designing the interfaces of digital products. So I guess the easiest example would be like a phone screen. Like when you open up an app, the user interface designer is the one who's actually designing the layout of that app, making it look pretty, making it functional. So a lot of the things that you would consider, like the fonts that you would pick, the colors that you pick, the layout of the app itself. And I guess like they are user experience design and user interface design are similar in the sense that they're both part of the product design process, but user experience design is usually like the full product cycle from start to finish, whereas user interface design is just one part of actually designing the product, which is the interface. So I guess like in a lot of like careers, a user experience and user interface designer will kind of be the same role. But in others, like they do have like a specific role for user experience designers because they tend to focus more on actually doing the research for the users. Whereas again, like interface design is just kind of like designing like the actual screens you might see on a website or on an app. So this is the digital design process that I was talking a little bit about earlier. And you can kind of see that user interface design is only a small part of the digital design process. It's very important, but it's not, again, the whole process. And I guess a UX designer would kind of be involved in this full process from start to finish. Whereas, like I said, the user interface designer would be focused more on just like sketching and designing the interfaces. So just to walk you through the design process, I guess the first part is to kind of understand what the problem is. So like you don't want to waste a lot of your resources, your money, your time on designing products that nobody even needs, which I think is one of those like myths about user interface design. Like it's not just about kind of making a product look pretty, but you actually need to be meeting some sort of need for the user. So you first want to make sure that you're clearly defining the problem and its impact. A lot of times this will be in kind of business terms. So like quantifying how much money you're losing by having like the lower version of a product. And then once you've clearly defined that product, you would move on to research. And research can kind of take on many different forms. I think probably the most important would be actually like talking face to face or online to users, because it's helpful to kind of like get an individual's from start to finish experience with using a product, because it gives you like a more in-depth understanding of how that product fails and how it succeeds. But there are other forms. So I guess surveys are very popular. Usually that's like rating the product on like a 1 to 5 scale. It's a lot quicker than an interview. Focus groups are basically just interviews, but with more people. Observational studies are super important. It's kind of like you would give the user the product and then kind of like just observe them as they use the product. And so that's really helpful in seeing like where the user's eye goes to first, because I guess if the user is kind of like focusing on the wrong part of the screen first, then you know that there must be something wrong with the design of the product. So observational studies are surprisingly super important. And then I also put down to consider alternatives, because you don't want to like reinvent the wheel, right? You want to make sure that what you're designing is actually an improvement from past, I guess, like products that have been made, and you can actually kind of draw strengths, I guess, from those products as well. And then like to sketch the product is kind of like the first step in the design, the actual like digital design process. So basically you would start by making these things called wireframes, and wireframes are essentially like an interface, but at its most basic level. Like you kind of just want to, you don't have like actual pictures or anything. You don't have actual copy. It's just kind of like, I guess, determining what you want the layout to be, kind of what features you want there to be. Like it's, I guess you can literally just like look up wireframe on Google and see some examples. It's kind of like a black and white, very like basic version of a full design. And so wireframes are important because, again, you don't want to put all your resources into making a design that's not going to work. So usually designers will make like multiple wireframes to showcase different ways you can solve the problem. And then like you'll decide on which one is best to put your full effort into. And then once you actually have decided which one is best, you would move into designing. And so designing is actually like converting your wireframes into the high fidelity interface design. And by high fidelity, I just mean kind of like everything is completely thought out. You have like the colors, you have the pictures, you have the actual copy or text that you want to put into the real like app or website. So essentially it's like the completed product, except we don't have all the functionalities yet. So like the buttons maybe don't lead to something, but the actual like design, like what you're looking at is there. And then you would move into implementing. So a lot of times this will be adding functionality to your prototype or your design. So like, I guess an example from what I mentioned before would be when you click on a button, you would actually see your screen like shift to the next screen. Or maybe if you designed like a field for the user to enter a name, you would kind of add a functionality to show like what that would look like after the user like actually interacts with your design. So Figma is a great tool for prototyping, but this is done in a lot of different ways. I mean, some people will use tools like Sketch instead. So it's kind of up to the designer, but prototyping is really important to actually like see your designs come to life and be able to like know that they're actually, the pretty design is actually like doing something. And then that leads us to the last step, which is evaluating. And evaluating is just kind of testing the design with the users. So literally you might give them like the screens that you've designed and ask for their feedback on things like what the fonts look like to them, if the text is clear, if kind of like the hierarchy of the site is clear. And then you would adjust based off of feedback. So I guess like in my experience, a lot of times like users might be like, well, these colors are kind of like distracting to my eyes. So you would go ahead and fix that. Or they might suggest that like maybe one of the icons you picked, they aren't able to figure out what that icon does. And so you would adjust that. And so essentially it's kind of like a circular process. Once you evaluate, you'll go back to designing and implementing, evaluate again until you've kind of come up with the completed product. But even then, like you're always kind of looking to improve things. So that's a little bit about the design process. And I forgot to mention this, but I guess if at any point you have questions, feel free to put those in the chat and I'll be able to address them as we go. But I did want to just take a moment to talk about some of the tools that designers use. And I tried to include like a range of tools for people who are just kind of starting out with design, but also those who kind of have a little bit more experience. So I can start with the research side of things. So like I mentioned, you need to kind of like understand the user's need. You need to ask questions about like why the products that exist already aren't working for them, or what features from those products they want to keep, then also like what features they want to see. So it's a lot of open-ended questions. It's a lot of recording interviews, going back to your interview notes. And so you need to be able to kind of keep everything in one place. So in my experience, simpler is better. Like I've literally used Google Forms for like the research projects that I've done. And so I feel like the forms are better for asking, like I said, like quantitative type questions or quick like rating questions. So you can use those in your actual like presentation of your design product. But things like, I guess, like Zoom, Google Meet, just your classic like video softwares are good for recording actual interviews with users. And then there are some tools that are helpful in kind of like transcribing like an audio recording into like text so that it's easy to look back on the notes. Evernote is one of those note-taking softwares that actually has that feature. I put down Notion because it's also a note-taking software that has, I guess, like more functionality than something like Google Docs in a way that lets you keep everything organized. So literally on one document, you could have like sub-documents that kind of talk about each stage of your research process. So that's really cool. And then at the bottom, SurveyMonkey and Qualtrics are both other types of like Google Form type softwares. They're a little bit better than Google Forms because they have more like functionality for showing like analysis of data. So you can literally like generate graphs and stuff directly on these softwares. So if you're looking to kind of branch into something more advanced than Google Forms, I would recommend Qualtrics especially. And then moving on to design, I'm sure a lot of you are probably familiar with Canva. Canva is like the most basic design platform that you can use. It's like super intuitive, super accessible. They have a lot of cool like designs already on there that you can kind of just use on your own. So if you're not like, if you're completely new to design, probably Canva would be the best bet. But Canva is not really used in kind of like industry design or in actual like career design. It's more so these platforms. So I use Figma a lot. I feel like Figma was kind of, I don't know, like a little bit hard to get used to at first, but once you actually get the hang of it, it has so many more features than Canva has, and it kind of gives a more like refined professional look to your designs. And then Sketch is also super popular in the industry. I personally don't really use Sketch because I feel like Figma is just a lot easier and it has everything like in terms of prototyping. But just to let you know, like Sketch is super popular as well. And then of course, like the Adobe series of software is super popular. But I will be focusing on Figma today. And I just wanted to mention that, especially for design softwares, a lot of them aren't free. Like Canva is free, but there is like a pro version. Figma is only free to a certain level, same with Sketch and Adobe. So I was just going to mention, like, you can literally get student licenses for these platforms so that you can use them for free. Canva has like a free Canva Pro subscription if you're a student. And then Figma has like a Figma for Student Designers program where you can get access to everything on Figma for free. Same with Sketch. And then I honestly haven't checked the Adobe softwares, but I believe like honestly all of these probably have a student license that you can get. So definitely make sure to look out for that. And then I wanted to touch on some like, I guess, common design principles just to keep in mind when you're designing. So typography is just kind of like the font choices that you're making in terms of your text. It's important to match the font to the context of like what you're designing. So I put an example down here. You can see that this first font is very like creative. It's more, I don't know, I would say a little bit more childish. So maybe it would be better if you're designing something that like has this space to be more playful. But the second font is a little bit more professional. It's more like, I guess, not as playful. So it might be better if you're designing something like a newspaper. So just kind of keep in mind that the context of what you're designing should kind of guide you to what font you should pick. And then I was going to mention to also be careful with your font pairing. So like you don't want to kind of like pair two fonts that are going to look really gross together. And I think a good way to kind of do that is to make sure that the context is the same for both. So for example, if you're designing like a newspaper like the New York Times, like you want to pick maybe one font for the headlines and one font for the actual like body text, but you want both of them to be like professional fonts that would be on a newspaper, right? So that's just two things to keep in mind. And then I would limit the amount of fonts that are used. There's no like hard rule, but I think, like I said, probably picking one font for headlines and then a second font for the actual body text would be a good idea. And then for color, you want to consider like the meanings of the color. So one of the things that surprised me when I was designing was like, I would pick red for certain colors, but then the feedback I got from users would be that like to them, red was associated with stopping. And so maybe they wouldn't click a button that was red because they thought that that was like, I don't know, some sort of error button or something that would kind of break the interface. So just keep in mind like the meanings of the colors that you pick. I would also consider contrast in the color pairing. So, you know, you don't want to pick two colors like this bright green and bright yellow that kind of like are super hard on the eyes, but are also like just, they don't really go together well. Maybe if you had picked like a pastel like green and then a white, that would be a lot easier on the eyes than these bright colors. And then that kind of plays into this idea of accessibility. So like one of the big trends, I guess, in UI and UX design right now is to like pay more attention to how our designs impact like other populations that might not like see things the same way that you do. So for example, people who are colorblind might have a hard time distinguishing like a button or two buttons, I guess, where one of them is red and one of them is green because they have red-green color blindness. So just keep that in mind when you're designing. Like you want things to be kind of clear to every user. Obviously, like you're not going to be able to please everyone, but when you're more accessible with your designs, it's just like better practice. And there actually are tools that kind of help you with checking like the contrast between your colors. And I'll get into that a little bit later. And just kind of limit the amount of colors you use. Like I said, there's no like strong like rule for this, but you don't want like 50 different colors, right? I think probably limiting to maybe, I don't know, less than 5 colors would be good. But keep in mind, like it's, I guess it kind of helps if you have one color and then pick like different variations of that color. So making that color a little bit lighter, a little bit darker. That's an easy way to kind of add more colors without overwhelming the user. And then hierarchy and layout is super important. Like I guess the guiding question when you think about like hierarchy or layout should be, where are my users going to look at first, and kind of what is the process of using this interface from start to finish. So you want their eyes to naturally be drawn to like what you want them to look at first. And then you want it to kind of just be like easy for them to move from that spot to the other places you want them to look, just based off of like the layout of the page. So some common ways to kind of like make the hierarchy clear would be color, scale, or grouping. So with color, you know, you can use color to highlight certain things. So a lot of times it's used for like buttons that you want the user to click. You might make a button like a dark blue color when the rest of the page is like white, and because that kind of, I guess, encourages the user to click that button. Scale is also really important. You can see this on the New York Times website, like having the headlines just naturally be bigger than the body text kind of draws you to look at the headline first. And then grouping would be just kind of grouping similar like elements together. So if you've looked at like the Spotify like app before, you know, they might group certain songs in one playlist together on the screen. Whereas like if you're looking at another playlist, those would be grouped together. It kind of just like helps you naturally see like the different hierarchy, I guess, on the page so that you know like where to look. And then I just put down like to try to limit font sizes, just because, you know, it kind of gets cluttered and unprofessional when you have more than 3. And the last note would be that mobile design has different considerations than web design. So I think like a good example of that would just be when you're using your phone, you tend to kind of click things easier when they're on the bottom of the screen, just because that's where your thumbs are when you're typing text messages and things like that. So a lot of times, like, you'll want to move buttons to the bottom of the screen when you're designing on mobile, but when you're designing on web, that's like not a hard rule. It's also the reason why I guess Apple came out with an update at one point where they moved the search bar to the bottom of the screen of your iPhone. That was just kind of because it's easier, again, for your thumbs to be at the bottom of the screen, so it's easier to press. Another example would be like when you're designing like buttons, if you want, like if you have like a back button and next button, sometimes it makes more sense to have the next button on the bottom right of the screen opposed to the bottom left, because like we're just used to, most people are used to pressing with their right hand rather than their left hand. So those are just little things to consider. And then the last note was just on some of the laws of UX design. I actually think I have this pulled up. We'll just take a quick look at it. So this website actually gives you some of the laws of design in like a really easy to understand way. So just to look at some of them, yes, let's see. I guess law of common region, it says that elements tend to be perceived into groups if they are sharing an area with a clearly defined boundary. So it seems like common sense, but like people sometimes forget to follow these rules when they're actually designing. So again, like when you group things together, it kind of like leads to a more refined feel that's easier for the user to kind of immediately understand. Law of similarity, like the human eye tends to perceive similar elements in a design as a complete picture. So again, like if you make things maybe the same color, it'll be natural for the user to assume those things are related. So I won't go through all of them, but I think this is a very helpful website to kind of bookmark and keep in mind when you're designing, because it tells you a lot of these like laws that you should incorporate into your designs. So we'll go back. And so now I just wanted to take a minute to talk about why UI and UX design are even important in the field of neuroscience, because I think people don't usually tend to associate a field that's more like artsy, like UI and UX design, with neuroscience, which is more like hard sciences. But it is like involved in the field of neuroscience. I guess the first example that I wanted to emphasize was science communication. So when you're designing like posters for science conferences, like, of course, it's not like an art contest, right? Like you don't need your poster to be super pretty, but when it's like, I guess when it makes use of the layout in a way that's just like easy on the eyes and it looks like clear and again, like easy for somebody to understand, people would be more likely to stop by your stand to learn more about your poster. So I think like just learning some of the basics of UI and UX design would be good if you want to like make a good looking poster and easy to understand science poster for conferences. Another example that I put down was technical research reports. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen any of those like infographic style research reports that kind of convey like key statistics from research studies. So I guess nobody wants to look at like a 5-page document that's has, I don't know, like paragraphs full of statistics. It's a lot better to kind of design them in a way where you're highlighting the key statistics, but you're also giving a little bit of context. And I think that when you understand like the rules of layout and color and picking fonts, it makes making those reports a lot easier on you, but also like easier for the user to understand. And so I guess science communication is one of those big areas where understanding design is helpful in neuroscience. And then the one that's really cool to me is in neurotech. So like it's an emerging field, I guess, where people are starting to think more about how softwares can be created to kind of analyze and pre-process data, but also to kind of treat patients who might be suffering from different conditions. And actually the research lab that I'm involved in right now developed a software for the analysis of intracranial EEG data. So that's basically like data from electrodes embedded within your brain. And I guess one of their considerations in developing like the actual software, and you can see a screenshot here, was how are you going to design a software for like super complicated data, but make it like seem like it's super usable for even somebody who doesn't have a lot of knowledge of like electrode data. And so that's something I've experienced myself, not having like a lot of knowledge on electrode data, but by the end of I guess these past couple of weeks, I've been able to use the software really well, just because I think it's designed in a way that's more intuitive. So you can see here that they're using things like emphasizing buttons by using color, or using like a different color when you select things so that the user knows that it was selected. So just little things like that kind of help make your software more successful. And I guess it's becoming more popular in neuroscience as we start developing more technological uses. And then the last part was just educational outreach. So that's a big part of what we do at Simply Neuroscience. I'm sure you all know that neuroscience is a field that's like very difficult sometimes to kind of understand and to especially get into when you're just starting out. And so like UI and UX design can play a super important role in kind of breaking down that information to make it like more digestible for the user. And so I think for me, like the biggest example of that would be in the posts that we put out on social media. So I'm sure you've seen our series, like the Mental Health Monday series or Fact Friday series. We try to kind of use design to our advantage to make these facts that might be hard to understand a lot easier to understand, because we're, employing design that looks pretty, that isn't too cluttered, that's very like functional and matched to the fact itself. So a lot of nonprofits like beyond Simply Neuroscience also pay attention to design when they're like making social media outreach type materials or infographics, or even when they're designing their own apps and websites. So yeah, and I guess I did want to point out that actually neuroscience is also helping to kind of inform the field of design. So it kind of goes both ways. If you, I guess, as you can imagine, like if you have a better understanding of how users make decisions, which you can gain from like maybe pursuing an undergraduate degree in neuroscience, it helps a lot when you're actually like designing the product, because you like just based off your education, like like what users might prefer. And so you don't have to spend so much time like researching that. So that's why actually like a lot of designers might have a degree in psychology, and they find that their surprisingly their psychology degree kind of help them in their like day-to-day design work. So that's just a really cool fact that I wanted to point out. And then kind of as a last bit before we get into the demo, I just wanted to highlight some resources and careers for UI UX design if this presentation has interested you. So I'll start with careers actually. As a UI UX designer, you could work for a company. So this could be like a startup or actually like a big company like Google or Meta. Usually they will be tech companies. Or you could freelance your work. So that just means that you're going to kind of like design things on your own for, I guess, companies or clients that you've kind of found on your own. And then I did want to point out that like there are kind of like differences, I guess, in like job titles. So some companies combine UI and UX design under the role of product designer. And so that basically means that you're just like designing, again, the product kind of from start to finish. Some like companies have a specific role for a UX designer, which would just be focused on researching with users. And then some kind of combine actually making the interfaces and doing the research, but maybe there's somebody else who's involved in like product management. So it kind of depends, but these are all like common job titles for the same type of role. The salary kind of depends like on a lot of factors, I guess, like where you're working kind of plays a role. Company is a really big one, depending on if you're working at like a startup or a big company. And then experience, like obviously, I guess as you gain more experience, the salary will increase. And one of the really cool things about design are that there are no strict educational requirements. So like I mentioned before, you could study psychology or neuroscience and still go into the field of design, because they're kind of just looking for people who have like the way of thinking, I guess, that would be good for design. And that would just be sort of product thinking, user-focused thinking. So you can, I guess, like a lot of designers are, they were engineering majors, or maybe they were like psychology majors. And of course you could major in design, but I just wanted to point out that it's very flexible. Some people actually don't even have like an undergraduate degree in anything related. And then maybe they just went to like a boot camp to develop some technical skills. So it's really flexible. The most important thing would just kind of be developing your portfolio, which showcases not just like the actual screens that you've designed, but your thought process in the project. So I mentioned product thinking before, kind of like, it's just this idea of like, how did you go from identifying the need to actually coming up with the features and designing the screen? So it's a whole like case study process, I guess, that goes into making your portfolio. And then with some resources, I guess, you'll be able to see these slides later, but if you want to take a screenshot right now, essentially these textbooks are what I use in my UI class that I took. UX Collective is like an online blog series that kind of has designers talk about how they develop their skills and kind of like give more advice for those who are looking to enter the field. And then there are some free online courses available. I put the names of some of them, but I'm sure you can find so many if you just put in like UI UX design courses on Google. And then if you want to gain more inspiration to see what design work looks like, you can go on these websites here. They're kind of like online portfolio sites where designers will share their work for you to gain inspiration. And then there are some online design communities. So Design Buddies is one that I'm in. Basically, it's a Discord group where you can share your work and get feedback. They also host a lot of design-focused workshops. So just some things to kind of keep in mind. And then now I wanted to go into our Figma demo. So these are actually like screenshots of actual products that I've designed in my classes and like activities. So I guess just to give a really quick intro, the first one that you see here was our my university's, I guess, like class registration website. It's notorious for being really hard to use, and so I kind of redesigned it to be easier to use. And then the second like pair of designs that you see here were for a project I did on kind of recreating a sort of app or website for those who tested positive for COVID on my university's campus. My idea was to kind of just streamline the process to make users feel like they had all the information about what to do if that happened to them in one place. So we can actually look at like my portfolio just to get a sense of like what I was talking about in terms of product thinking. So these again are just 2 case studies that I worked on for a class. And like I said, they're hosted on Figma, but I guess like we'll just scroll through this really quickly. Essentially, when you're doing like a case study, you kind of want to give your process from start to finish. So this was just my little intro with the summary of what the project was for. I gave a little like overview of my timeline in creating the project. Like I mentioned, you have to kind of define the problem clearly. So the diagram you see here is just a user flow diagram. Essentially, I looked at the original website for course registration and kind of outlined all the features and buttons available on that website so that I knew what I wanted to recreate when I was actually redesigning. So this is very common in kind of like design workflows. This is a screenshot of what the system used to look like before. I kind of outlined my research here. So I had some goals for my research. This was the process of research. These are the people I interviewed. And then synthesis is just kind of like describing the key findings from your research. So I used the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats table. It's also very common in design. These were trends from my like Google survey that I did. So you see like highlighting specific statistics. And then these are quotes from actual users I interviewed. And then these are wireframes. So like I mentioned, they're very bones, black and white, kind of limited features shown. But yeah. And then this was the final UI. I kind of talk about, like I highlight the specific features that I wanted to call attention to. So you can see them here. Yeah, I guess. I don't know if I have the other project shown as well, but let's see. Okay, I won't go through all this because I know it's like a lot, but I'll just kind of show this project as well. So this was just, again, the project for those who tested positive for COVID on my university's campus. You can see the problem was that there wasn't like a streamlined app that would kind of help. So I decided to redesign one. Same kind of idea with showing the research process. And then like the SWOT analysis, survey findings. This is just guiding questions for design. They're called how might we statements. So kind of like you want to pinpoint the features that you are thinking of redesigning basically. These were the wireframes. So this was mainly a mobile design product. So you can see that kind of different from the web design. You can see that icons are at the bottom just because, again, like it's easier to click on things at the bottom when you're using your phone. Yeah, I guess I won't go through all of these, but just some examples so you know what I'm talking about. These were some feedback that I got for user testing. And then these are just kind of the high fidelity wireframes. You can see I made use of color, but not like super overwhelming or anything. And then this is the same thing, but with the website. And then I'll just quickly show like the prototype feature on Figma. So I'll go a little bit more into depth about how this works, but essentially like Figma allows you to kind of take all your screen designs and then add some functionality to them so that you can see like what the process would actually look like when the app is made. And the cool thing is if you have the Figma app, you can actually like, I guess, sync it to your like design to your phone so that you can play around with it on your phone and see how it would actually work. So I'll just kind of go through it quickly. But when users like log in, they would go to the home screen and then maybe it would tell them it's time to complete your daily check-in. So they could click that button and then they could keep clicking through completing the survey. So you can see the animations kind of show how it would actually work for a user. Maybe they click submit and then maybe they would go to a different page, the test results page. So you can see I click this button, I could click the calendar, click a date, and then I could, click a date and then click submit result. And then, I guess I won't show all of this, but this would be like a like a hamburger menu option, where they could click some different like parts of the screen. So the whole idea is that you kind of just get to see how your designs work on Figma, which is really cool. So I guess now I wanted to kind of go into, let's see, it's 7:41, so maybe we could do like a 15-minute demo on how to use Figma. So it would be great if you guys pulled up Figma right now and then kind of follow along with me as I like redesign one of these screens, because I'll be sure to kind of pinpoint some of the really cool like features that Figma has. But before I do that, did anyone have any questions about anything I talked about before, or I guess any specific things that you wanted me to show on Figma? Feel free to put it in the chat.
Oh no, this would be a new Figma file or a new jam or design file or a Fig jam.
I would make a new Figma file. So I guess this would be the Figma home screen. And then should be this button right here. Yeah, so new design file.
Okay, awesome. Thanks.
So then I'll go back to this little demo. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay, I guess we'll start, but feel free to put anything in the chat. So I guess the first thing that you kind of need to do is create a frame on the screen. So the frame is kind of where all the elements on your screen will live. So if I click on this, for example, the frame would be this little cream rectangle that you see in the background. And so I guess the like best way to do that would probably be if you click on this button here, and then you can click frame and it'll appear on the right side here. So I find the really helpful frames would be the ones focused on like what you're designing for. So you can see that since I was designing for like an app interface on my phone, I picked maybe like the iPhone 13 Pro Max. So again, this is super helpful because you can literally see it on your phone and play around with it to make sure that it like works as you'd intend it to. But just to show, I guess there are other devices. So there's like presentations, there's tablets, there's websites. So this is like MacBook Pro 16. Essentially, again, this is where all the elements on your screen will live. But I'll stick with the iPhone 13 Pro for now. Okay. So I guess I'll show first how you would change the color of maybe the frame. So on Figma, changing color is the fill option. So as you can see here, it's pretty simple. You kind of just select whatever color you want. If you have a specific color code, you can just enter it in here. You can make the color, like adjust the transparency using this feature. And then Figma will actually save the colors that you've been using for you. So that's super helpful if you're on like the 15th screen of a project. But I guess another really cool thing is the little like eyedropper feature. So you can match colors to something that you're already working on. So in my case, I'll just match it to this color, but you guys can feel free to pick any color that you want. So that's kind of the first step. And then the next, I guess, step would be adding other like elements to your frame. So in Figma, it's not like Canva where you kind of have existing elements that you can, or pictures that you can add. You kind of have to design everything from scratch. So a lot of what you'll be doing is like clicking on a rectangle, and then you can drag your cursor to adjust the size of the rectangle as you put it onto the frame. So once you've done that, it's pretty like, I guess it's pretty similar to Canva in that you kind of just drag and drop, but you can see it'll never go like, it won't like go outside the frame because everything is going to live on the frame. And then you can just adjust the size you want. In this case, I kind of wanted like a header, I guess, for the app screen. And so I'm just going to kind of do that. So we have that. And then I guess just to show, there are some other options. So besides rectangle, there is just like circles. You could pick like, I guess, different shapes. I guess triangle is super common. There's a star as well. And then arrows and lines are also super helpful. And I guess I can probably show this too. You can also place an image directly. So for example, if you're designing a website and you wanted to show like a picture of, I don't know, some clothing that you're selling, you can literally just like place the image directly. And that's pretty simple. It's kind of just like whatever image you want, you would select. So just to show, I'll place this image. You can place it anywhere on the screen, but if you want to place it on the frame, you'll notice that again, it doesn't go off the frame, which is really nice. I guess you can adjust the size of the image. And then one of the things I did want to show is that you can make kind of like rounded images or rounded rectangles, which is really nice to give a more like, I guess like comfortable feel to your product. So you can see that like for the little symptom checker here, the rectangles that I have are a little bit like rounded in their edges, which makes it feel like less jarring for the user. And the way you do that is that you just kind of go to the corner radius button here, and then like pick whatever number you want to adjust how rounded it would be. So 15 might be a good number in this case. I guess you can also adjust the sizes by adjusting the X and Y, or sorry, the width and height coordinates. And then X and Y can help you adjust like the placement on the screen, but I find it easier to just like drag it to where you want it to be. And then I guess if you want to make it transparent, you can just adjust the 100% here. If you want to hide it for whatever reason, you can just click the little eye icon here. And then if you want to delete, you can just click like the delete button on your keyboard, or you can click the little like minus sign here. So that's that. And then the next thing I wanted to show are the text features. So you kind of just to show again how that works, you drag and drop basically. So I can type like symptom checker. And then it's pretty simple to adjust like the sizing. You can scroll to the text box here, and then you can like set a specific heading. So if you wanted it to be, sorry, not the right word, but specific like type of the font. So if you wanted like semi-bold, you have that. If you want like light, you have that. And then you can just change the number to be whatever size you want. This feature here adjusts the line height. So if I made it like 20, you can see that it kind of reduces the line height. So I'll change it back to 60. This adjusts the spacing of the letters themselves. I find that 0% is usually a good number, so I'll keep it at that. And then this is paragraph spacing. So if I had written like multiple paragraphs, you can adjust it that way. This is just like center text, same as something like Canva or text editor. And then I guess like this helps align the text like kind of on the page. So those are really helpful. But again, you can kind of just drag it to where you want it to be. And then I guess this helps adjust like the text itself. So if you want it to be like more in a row format, you could click something like this. But if you want to keep it as is, that's fine too. Yeah, so this is the font like picker. One of the unfortunate things about Figma is that it doesn't show like the fonts as they look on the font picker. So it's kind of hard to actually see what the font looks like. There is something called like a plugin on Figma that you can download to help with this. But when I downloaded it, it didn't really work super well. So I feel like you might just have to do like a trial and error type thing. And then I guess like this is just the same thing. Fill controls the color. And then I guess, so if you were wondering how you would add like, I guess like an outline on a text, then you would add something called the stroke. So that would be the plus button here. And you can adjust the color as well as kind of like how thick you want the outline to be. So I just, for demonstrative purposes, I put a 5 there so you can kind of see. It's kind of like a better feature, I guess, than what Canva has. And then you can change the stroke style. So if you wanted like dash outlines, that looks horrible, but just to show. And then this controls like where you want the outline to be. So I'll just remove that for now. And then one of the other really cool things is the effects. So if you wanted to add like a special effect to the text, you could do that, or a special effect to any element. So drop shadow is kind of popular. It's essentially like it'll create a shadow effect beneath the text, but it does look a little bit unprofessional at times. So I would just keep that in mind. So in this case, I'll just take it off. They do have other effects though. So they do have like an inner shadow instead, which is a little more subtle. They do have the layer blur. So if you wanted like a blur effect for whatever reason, but yeah, I guess no need to kind of put that on now. And then I honestly never really used export, so I feel like it's not super necessary right now. But let me just adjust this. Let's say I wanted to make it like 18 or something. Sorry, 18. Sorry, I was adjusting the wrong thing. So we'll make that like, I don't know, 40 or something. And then bold is kind of the same. It works the same as like it would on anything. You can just do Control or Command B to make it bold, or you could do that here. So I'll actually make this a little bit reduced. So I guess you kind of know how to add the text. So I'll just copy this over to save time. And then I wanted to show you how to add icons. So let's say that I wanted to create kind of like this button here. So first drag a rectangle, and like we went over, I'll change the corners to be rounded. I will maybe change the color, and then you know how to add in the text now, but let's say you wanted to add in an icon. So Figma has something called plugins. Essentially, they're like added functionalities that you can give like the Figma design interface by downloading them like externally. So they don't come with like a default Figma account that you open up. When you download them, you'll see them and you can use them as if they were any other feature on Figma. So you can kind of like right click, and then there should be like a section called plugins. And then you could go to saved plugins. If you've never used Figma before, you probably won't see anything there. So I'll show you just how like one of the plugins worked, and then I'll demonstrate like how to actually download the plugins. So let's see, I have a ton of them, but in this case, I wanted to like add an icon. So material design icons can help with that. This, I don't know why my internet's not working, but it'll essentially come up with a bunch of like icons that you can add. Let's see. Okay, I'm not sure why that's not working, but let me see if I can. Icon plugin. So to download like a plugin, you would just kind of like literally look it up on Google, and then when you go to the link, it should be like a Figma community link, because these are like, again, added functionalities that Figma designers have like published, and you can download them to add. So usually there's like a download button, or you could just click try it out. So you can click try it out and then open in Figma Design. Click the account that you want to use it with. And then it should add it to your list of saved like plugins. Some plugins aren't free, so I just keep that in mind. But let's see, like this is the one that I have, material design icons. So when you went to that link, you can click try it out, and then it should add it to your list of plugins. So that's how you get a plugin. There should be like, honestly, a plugin for anything that you're looking to like use. So I guess one of the plugins that I have is called like the color contrast plugin. So it'll show you, I guess, like if your color pairing is accessible or not to people who have color blindness, which is really helpful. So that's just a reminder, I guess, if you ever want added functionality, I would try to look it up on Google to see if there's a plugin for it and then download that. Let's see if I can get one of the plugins to work. I guess you can see I had just clicked try out Iconify, and it added it to my plugin list. So that's super helpful. Let me see. I also have font awesome icons. So let me see if that works. Okay, so this works. Essentially, like it'll just show you a list of icons, where you could search for one, and then you kind of add it in. So it'll add it in like by default as like a black icon, but if you want to change it, you could kind of just click the color to change it. And then you probably will have to, one of the weird things, I guess, is that like the icon is different from the color. So you'll usually have to like select the entire thing and then try to like increase the size. One of the other really cool things is that if you have like multiple elements, so let's see, I can like copy this element twice. If you want to like be able to move them as if they were one element, you can just highlight both and then do Control G or Command G. And then that will kind of treat them as one element, because essentially it groups them. And you can see here that it creates a new group for it on Figma. So you can see like what's in the group. So that's super helpful. So yes, delete one of these for now. And then let's see, make it like the white color that I have. Sorry, white color that I have, beige color. So yeah, you can add it in. I won't be super precise, just so that we can get through showing some more features. So yes, for the sake of time, I just want to focus on some specific features instead of recreating the entire screen. But one of the really cool features in Figma is something called auto layout. So sometimes it's really hard, like if I have multiple of these like little blocks, sometimes it might be hard to align them so that like everything is kind of exact and orderly. So Figma has this feature called auto layout, which will assign everything for you into like an organized group, so that you don't have to worry about making sure maybe the gap between these two blocks is consistent. So the way to do auto layout is that you would do, you essentially like go over the whole, like highlight the whole thing that you want to auto layout. And then Shift A is the keyboard shortcut for auto layout. So I usually use that, and you can see that just maybe to demonstrate better. Like if I had these all over the place, I might highlight them and then do Shift A, it'll put them all in like an organized row. And if I want to kind of like fix the spacing, that would be the second option here, and you could change it to whatever you want it to be. So it's just super like helpful whenever you're designing like I guess a part of a web page or an app that utilizes a lot of repetitive like elements. And then like this little like box here can help you with alignment. So that's kind of if you have like I guess a lot of small elements, it's super helpful. But in this case, since it's just 3 same size blocks, like, there's no need to align anything because they're all the same size. I guess this is vertical padding. So padding is just kind of like the spacing above or below like your auto layout element. So if I adjust this to like 60, it'll add space above and below. And then this is just horizontal padding. So I highly recommend using auto layout. Again, it's Shift A for the keyboard shortcut. It just kind of keeps everything like in one frame. especially, which is super helpful. Yes, I'm trying to see what other features might be helpful to show. You can use like the layout grid feature. So that's helpful if like maybe you want to align things in a specific way, but off the top of your like head that you can't really like tell what is the perfect alignment. So when you show the grid, I guess you can even make it like smaller, like 2. It kind of gives you these red lines to help guide where you want to put your elements. So I don't know, like if I wanted this to be like specifically aligned with that block, the grid would be super helpful for that. I guess to be honest, I don't really use the grid feature that often, but it is there and I just wanted to point that out. Once you're done using the grids, like you can obviously hide them so that you make sure that everything is actually in the right place. Let's see. Yes. There's something called constraints, which again help with just kind of spacing on the page. So I don't know, let's say you wanted something to be in like the right corner of your frame. Like the constraints can kind of help with that. So essentially it just kind of helps with balancing things. I don't really honestly use constraints that often, but just so that you know. And then the last thing I really wanted to demonstrate was how to prototype on Figma. So again, prototyping is just kind of like the tool that lets you add the actual like functionality or user interactions to your static designs. And you can see that they're represented by arrows because I had already added some like prototype features here. But essentially the way that you like, I guess, prototype things is that you would go to the prototype tab and you would design different flows. So once you're in the prototype like part of the screen, there should be little like parts of the elements, like little dots, I guess, that you can, probably not this dot, but should be little parts that you can drag and drop to prototype things. So I guess, let's see, show prototype settings. We can look at the one that I actually designed before. So yeah, there should be like these little like buttons basically with the plus sign. And then essentially you would be able to drag this arrow. Once you like, I guess, click on the actual dot, you should be able to drag and drop to wherever you want to, like the button or the element to lead to. So in this case, like this button is supposed to lead to a different screen when users click on it. So I would just literally drag it to the screen. And then it'll give you some specifications. So maybe you want the screen to appear when the user clicks on the button, in which case you might want to like set it to on click. Or you might want a screen to appear when the user is hovering on like a certain part of the screen. So you would click while hovering. You can also kind of set it to, I guess, when you're pressing on something. So you have to like press on it for more than a couple seconds. So they're just different specifications for the prototypes. And then you can also set, I guess, like how you want it to actually like arrive at that screen. So you can have it slide, you could have it like, it's basically, these are different animations that you can add. So I'll keep it to on drag for now. Then I guess once you've actually like set a prototype, you can click the little play button here, and then it should, I guess, allow you to kind of visualize the prototype arrows that you just set before. So I'll see if I have any on here for right now, but I guess, for example, let's see, options. And I guess just to show whenever you're presenting something, Figma usually by default has a really weird way of like showing the screen. So you might want to set it to like fit to screens so that you can see everything, or fit with, fit screen, just something to keep in mind. So let's see if I set, I guess I didn't set any like actual prototypes on this because it's just the demo. But I guess a good example would probably be, let's see. So this is my actual like file, I guess, for the project that I designed before. And you can see that when I go to prototype, there's like a billion arrows because once you click on different parts of the screen, it leads you to different like features. So once you've actually set those arrows, you'll be able to see them in the viewer once you click play. So this should work since I actually have arrows that I set. And the way that you can kind of visualize them is just by clicking the little arrows at the bottom here, or you can just use your keyboard. So you can click like the next arrow. Sorry. Okay, that works. So for example, if I like, click this or click this button here, it goes to the next screen. Similar when I click these buttons. So all of these like animations or changes between slides that you see are due to the prototype arrows that we set before. So I guess just to show that one more time. So once you go to prototype, there should be, I guess like you can see here, like for example, there's this like little arrow and I can drag it to wherever I want, like this part of the screen when you click on it, like where I want it to lead to. So just for fun, like let's say I want it to lead to, let's see, the next screen. It'll give you some features. So again, like maybe I want to set it so that when I click on that part of the screen here, it'll go to the next screen. And you can say if you want it to be like instant or, dissolve. Smart Animate is kind of like, if there's similar features on the screen, Figma will kind of automatically adjust the animation so that it's not like the animation is kind of seamless. So yeah, and I guess you can adjust it at any time. You can remove it if you want to, but I think the prototype feature is probably one of the best parts of Figma. So I guess that's kind of getting past time now, but those are some of the features I wanted to highlight. Does anyone have like features that they want me to show again or anything that you were wondering about in terms of the demo that we just did? I know I went through it kind of fast, so if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat or unmute. But I guess one more thing to show is that when you're like actually showing your work, it's very similar to like a Google file. You can just kind of get the link for people to view. I guess Figma just pointed out that they do have like a new part of the bar for plugins, so that's super helpful. I guess one thing I forgot to show is that you could like directly draw on the frame or the screen. So these are the pen and pencil features. You can see like I could just draw lines on the screen and it'll adjust the curves based on like where I'm putting the lines. That's helpful. This is text we went over. The little hand feature allows you to kind of move through your design without clicking anything. So that's nice if you need to maneuver to a different part of the screen or just kind of want to look at things differently. We went over most of these, I think. Scale is helpful if like you want to move an element, like let's say I wanted to move this frame with automatically adjusting, I guess, all the elements within the frame to be like the same like size distribution that they are on the screen right now. So you can see that when I like make this bigger, it's not only making the frame bigger, but it's actually making the elements inside bigger. So that's really helpful. Whereas if I had done this normally, right now everything's in the frame, so it's not going to move. But if I had done, actually, yes, some parts are not in the frame. So the parts that aren't in the frame, you can see aren't moving with me because I'm not using the scale feature, I'm using the move feature. So yeah, I think that's kind of everything we need for the basics right now. I've honestly never used inspect before, so I feel like that's not super important right now. Yeah, this is just Zoom. Yeah, I think that's kind of everything. But again, does anybody have any questions at all about Figma or design in general, or like anything that you were wondering about? I'll go back here, but if you do think of any questions, like feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat. I'll send the slides after, but if you want like any other resources, feel free to let me know. Yeah, I think that kind of covers everything. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask now. But if you don't, thank you so much for coming today. I really appreciate you guys coming on such like short and scheduled notice. This recording will be available on our SN YouTube channel. So if you missed anything or kind of want to go back to some of the resources, you can see those there. But yeah, I think that kind of concludes everything. Thank you guys so much again for coming. I really appreciate it. And let me know if you ever have any questions about design. And I hope this presentation was helpful for you guys. So thanks so much. And if the rest of you on this call have any questions, feel free to let me know now.